Ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Go. All right. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to talk about pedigree versus non-pedigree. What is the difference? This is just my opinion because there's been some ranting going on. A pedigree versus non-pedigree. Some folks believe that it doesn't matter, and a lot of times it's true. You know what I'm saying? But it depends on whether you're doing one-off racing or club racing, okay? And even then, sometimes it doesn't matter as well. It matters on how good the quality of birds you have. And, sometimes when you want to sell your birds for expensive prices, you need a pedigree, okay? A pedigree means this, okay? Cash value, okay? A non-pedigree bird, a bird without any pedigrees, the most you'll probably get for is maybe $100, sometimes $50. That's how people look at things, okay? A pedigree is just the platform and the track record of the bird's lineages and breeding programs that the bird has been bred from. So with the pedigree, you get to see how the bird was bred, from what parents or lineages or what handler or what owner to what owner and stuff like that. Because some people or some owners are known to have very, very good pedigrees or very, very good birds or very expensive birds, birds that win a lot of racing events. And therefore sometimes if you're fortunate, you can buy a non-pedigree bird for about $50 or $100 or $75 or even less, sometimes even free. And that non-pedigree bird, can sometimes, be worth or performance wise, can still beat the very high dollar birds, depending on just on the day of the race, depending on the quality of that non-pedigree bird. Because sometimes some people, they spend a lot of money on pedigree birds and they breed junk and then they sell it off. They sell the junk birds off to people for very cheap. And then those people, they bring those junk birds and they crossbreed them to their other birds, and then boom, they get something very fantastic out of them. So therefore, sometimes a pedigree doesn't really matter if you're just breeding for for the club racing. But sometimes, if you know what you're doing, if you know what kind of birds you have, you can, even though you're not provided a pedigree, you could still crossbreed into your very best birds, or if you know how to, if you have a good eye for the type of pigeons that you're breeding, you can really cross and make some really good birds. You know what I'm saying? And then we're gonna talk about club racing, okay? So for club racing, right here, club racing, for instance, these are different clubs, all right? These are different lofts here. For club racing, at 100 miles right here, right? 100 miles, you guys release about like 500, 200, 500 birds. All the birds will fly the same direction. They will follow each other greatly. 200 miles, same thing. And that's nothing to worry about. If your birds are healthy, they want to come home, they will come home. The only difference is that if your loft is out of the way of where the majority of the birds are flying, kind of like me or like a lot of other folks, it's kind of hard to get first place. And if your loft is really close to each other like this, all right, it'll only take a few seconds, to win. You can win by 15 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, and whatever else, okay? And it's very easy to get into the top 10% if you are closer to other people's lofts where majority of the birds are pulling in that direction. If you are a little bit further out off the course, it's not as easy to get first place unless you train your birds often and they do come home consistently. But it's not easy. It's not always easy because most birds will follow each other, into the city before they start breaking off and going to their own directions. Okay, so that's the hard part about club racing. Now, club racing, the best way to determine your birds is when you go up to 300 plus miles, because then that's when a lot of birds and how good you are as a handler, you will know, how good your birds really are, okay? All right, because the fast ones, they will start to pick up speed and come home really, really fast. while the slow ones, or the ones who give up, they'll pedal themselves, and then they might give up eventually at the 150 miles, 200 miles, or at the, you know what I'm saying, or even like, you know, go to different lofts along the way, because every area has pigeon lofts or feeders or feed mills. You know, there's grain mills out there, you know what I'm saying, they're everywhere. Where there's dozens and dozens or thousands and hundreds of pigeons out there. And if your pigeon's not motivated to come home, they will land and go somewhere else along the route and not come home. Okay, so that's part of the reason why sometimes our birds, they come home 2 weeks or 1 week later, and they're in super health conditions because they stopped along the way at a different loft, and those owners fed them, gave them food and water and whatever else, and they gave them the free choice to fly home or not, and then they flew home. Okay, so, but yeah, from the 150, 200 miles, it's very easy to be competitive, but from the 300 up to the 500 miles, that's when, you know what I'm saying, it gets really, really tough for old birds, that is. 500 miles, we can't even drive 500 miles without getting tired or needing to pull over and get a break. So therefore, if you get a birds in on the day around 10 hours, 11, 12 hours, your bird is pretty good, okay? But, all right, so one for now, that's for club racing. One-loft racing though, one-loft racing, okay, this is one, we're gonna talk about one-loft racing. One-loft racing, okay, you need very, very good breeding skills, okay? You gotta have an eye for your bird, and you gotta know what kind of birds you're breeding, okay? You got fast birds, okay? You got a fast bird, okay? And then you got a long distance bird. All right? And you want to try to breed a middle distance bird. You know, you want to try to kind of, you know, crossbreed these two, the fast birds and long distance birds, to try to invent yourself some good middle birds. That's what I always try to do. All right? I got a few fast birds. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes they don't have the greatest homing skills. I got a few long distance birds, but sometimes they're not the fastest or the most desirable birds, you know, and they don't handle too well and whatever else. You know, they're a little bit too big, too fat, too short, too strong, or whatever. But when I crossbreed them, you know what I'm saying, I create some pretty cool, decent little middle distance birds, okay? That's how I create middle distance birds, okay? Middle distance is around the 350 miles mark. That's normally the final race for all one-loft race birds, okay? So this is nothing new. A lot of you guys do the same. A lot of breeders out there do the same thing, but I'm just approaching you guys today because, you know, I've been kind of, like I said, you know, people's been nagging about, you know, pigeons and whatnot. At the end of the day, it's all about the individual pigeon. You can breed the same bloodline as I do, and if your birds aren't having a good day, you won't win. If my birds aren't having a good day, I won't win. You know, sometimes a lot of luck has to play in how the birds will get home on those days as well. But bloodlines increase your chances, okay? Bloodlines, which is pedigree, okay? Pedigree gives you, you know what I'm saying, the outline or the knowledge of knowing what kind of birds you are keeping, what kind of birds and how the bird's performance had performed in the past. So a pedigree is very important because it brings cash value. Okay, if you have very, very good winning birds that's been winning competitively at the one-loft racing events, that increases your cash flow. If you have a very, very good competitive bird that wins at a club racing, it still might not be worth as a bird that can win at one-loft racing. Why? Because at club racing, there's too many different variables, okay, that determines a good bird. So your bird, you know what I'm saying, your bird that won, let's say 31st places, right? Your bird that wins 31st places at club racing level, right? You might breed him, you know what I'm saying, you might want to send him to the one-loft racing, and he might do absolutely nothing. Those birds might do absolutely nothing. But because you are a good handler, you have the right loft location, you know, your birds came in and you're always pulling all the other birds in first, and you're a good trainer, you get up every morning, you train your birds, yeah, you know, you can create yourself a 30 times first place winner or whatever else. But that doesn't mean that that bird can actually breed you a good one-loft racing pigeon. Okay, so one-loft racing pigeon, like I've said before to some people on Facebook, those one-loft racing birds, they do very, very good when all conditions are the same. Okay, so if you got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 birds, or a couple hundred birds all together in just one loft, one huge gigantic loft, and those birds are brought to the release point, okay? Under those conditions, those birds start to excel and start to fight to get in the front of the flock. Okay, one-loft racing birds are birds that fight really hard to get in front of the flock. Those birds are birds that don't like to stay behind the flock. They're the smart birds that love to see, the front of the flock. They always want to leave the flock and they always want to come home fast. Okay? So, but some birds, they don't start to show them their skills until they start reaching the long distance, the 350, 400, 500 miles. They'll probably pedal behind and slowly hang behind until, until they start seeing familiar territories. Then they start sprinting really, really fast. That's when they start kicking butts, okay? So a one-loft racing bird is designed a bit differently. They're designed to stay out in the front consistently. They're designed to come home when it matters the most. That's what they breed for, okay? So that's what a one-loft racing bird does. Now, if you put a good one-loft racer into a club race and they go out to 350 miles as a young bird, all right, it might fly really, 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 really fast, okay? And if you don't train them well, you don't handle them well, they might stop along the way and not come home. Or they might go to a different loft. You just never know. But what I'm saying is, that's the difference between non-pedigree and pedigree birds. People keep arguing whether or not a pedigree bird matters or a non-pedigree matters. It almost doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want in the sport and hobby and try your luck at everything that you want to try. But, for the ones who have success or or is starting businesses or breeding to sell, they want pedigrees. Pedigrees is what brings in the money and the cash flow. If you just want to enjoy the hobby, you could buy any non-pedigree birds from a person who's willing to sell you birds for cheap or give you birds, and you can crossbreed those birds and create some really good birds yourself for the club racing or for the one-loft racing as well, if you're very, very lucky. So therefore, that's the end of that story, okay? Club racing, it's all about how you train and manage the bird because it's a team. One-loft racing, all conditions are fair and the same, and under those conditions, one-loft race birds, the winners, they always propel when it counts. After they've flown the 100, after they start flying, after the 100, 200 miles, they still start to come home. Their heart starts pumping, they start to come home really fast, while all the other birds are still lagging behind, okay? So therefore, that's the difference between club racing and non-pedigree, okay? Club racing is difficult because you have different lofts, and if this loft right here is flying 100 birds, and this loft here is flying 30 birds, and this loft here is flying 50 birds, and this loft here is flying 70 birds, and if your loft is right here and you're only flying 10 birds, your birds are going to get all mixed up. They're going to fly this way, that way, this way, that way, until they finally realize, oh my gosh, that's not their home, they're going to come back this way. So that happens a lot of times. So if you train really, really, really good, you can still get your birds to lead the pack and come home as well. But it's all up to you. But that's that, all right? I hope that answers some questions because, a lot of people try to frustrate things and try to start an argument whether pedigree or non-pedigree doesn't matter. Non-pedigree, a pedigree doesn't make the bird fly if you're club racing, okay? If you're club racing, you can have the best pedigree in the world. But if you don't know how to train your birds, and your birds are too fat or not healthy, you're not going anywhere. If you fly non-pedigree birds against pedigree birds, and your non-pedigree birds are super healthy, you're a very good handler, very good trainer, and all these things right, and you did all the things right, and your loft location is in the best area, and and your birds are always coming in first. You train your birds to come in first, and whatever else. Then yeah, you're most likely going to do pretty good. You might beat all the birds with the pedigree. But if you got very strong pedigree birds and you're a very good handler and very good trainer, you're gonna be one of those very hard to beat guys. So that's the difference. If me and you or any one of you, if we train the same, I would not. If we train the same, feed the same, and we harbor all the same instincts, you know what I'm saying? Loft location is going to determine whether or not we're going to do good. But club racing, another factor in club racing, the hardest part is the wind. Okay, with some areas at release point there's no wind, but along the point right here, like at the 200 miles right here, there is some really strong, you know what I'm saying, very strong winds. All right, your birds might get all confused. They might, you know, they might get blown north, or they might get blown south. You know, it happens, you know what I'm saying? And they might go to different areas because the winds here are carrying them too strong to different areas. And pigeons, sometimes they won't fight the wind. They'll just ride the wind. And sometimes the wind might carry them too far. So, you know, you gotta understand that part as well. But long distance bird though, yeah, you know, if your bird is a long distance bird, true long distance bird, even in strong winds, the reason why long distance birds is in my area, we have strong winds. On any given day, you know, we have bad days and good days, but bad days sometimes. And when the bad days happens, the long distance birds are the ones that always come home. Why? Because even though the wind blows them this way, they'll be able to land along the way and come back home. Land and come back home, or fly very gently and slowly and still get home. While the sprint birds, they sprint too fast and they just disappear off into the distance and don't know where and into different territories, and they get lost forever. So that's that. I hope that answers some of you guys' questions. It is what it is. You know, it is kind of confusing, but I try to explain it as best as I can. 100, 200 miles, that's easy. Even the junkiest birds, if you train them well, condition them well, they'll still get home. But when they go 250 to 350, 400 miles, those racing events are tough because they gotta fly 800-900. They gotta fly 8 to 9, 10 hours straight to get home, and most of them won't have the muscle or the bloodlines, the muscle or the instincts or any of that stuff. And after 50 or 100 or 200 miles, they might just stop and land and not come home anymore. They might join other flocks. Okay, so when you breed for a pigeon, you want to breed for the heart that never gives up and always keeps coming home. And then you add a little bit of speed to it. Then you add a little bit of, you know, say a little bit of more muscle mass to it, or whatever you want to do. You crossbreed the way you think is best. That creates the best pigeon for you. If you don't want to spend a lot of money on pedigrees, okay? But you know, you can buy non-pedigree birds at a very cheap price and try to do your own crossbreeding as well. That's how we always did it. And, you know, when we were raising, you know what I'm saying, chickens or any of that stuff. You know, you want to breed for the traits that you think is going to make a good combination to bring your birds home at the quickest and the fastest and most valuable time. Even though we're not there yet, in the next 5 or 10 years, we can see ourselves being at, you know what I'm saying, at a very competitive level. Since we're only in the beginning stages of our, you know what I'm saying, racing pigeon stuff, and we have a lot of interference and stuff like that, we're not planning to do too well. You know, we're just planning to learn along the ways, but you know, but the skills that we developed over the years, it eventually get us to the very top, and we'll be very competitive up there always. But here in our area where we're racing right now, the Pikes Peak region, you're gonna have to we're in high elevation. Along the way here, it's all high elevation. There's winds going this way, there's winds going that way. Every few, you know what I'm saying, 30 miles or so, there's different winds. And you know, and that'll cause the birds to really struggle, and only the best ones will come home, and that sometimes won't determine whether your birds are really good or not. You know, and if you want to know if you have good birds for one-loft racing, try out the small one-loft racing first, the cheap ones. The cheap one-loft racing events, depending on area location, you know, you want to send your birds out to those cheap ones, test your birds out. If they keep clocking in the top 10% and stuff or something like that, then you're doing pretty good. You might just need to breed a little bit more speed birds into them to get them to clock in a little faster. But besides that, you know what I'm saying, that's how I like to see things, and that's how I like to do things. You know what I'm saying? This is just simple knowledge. This is common sense for a lot of people, but it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? So just something to talk about, guys. You know, sorry for going a little bit too long about this, but I just wanted to get this out there, you know. All right. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care. God bless. We'll see you on the next one. Peace out.